So here we are in section 2 of Mice and Men. And since I accidentally ate the fruit, George and Lenny, that I had created, I've had to recreate them. So we've now got gingerbread men, George and Lenny. This is George. You can tell because he's very small, but he's got his hat on. And this is Lenny. You can tell because he's very big, and I've given him a nice formless expression. So George and Lenny arrive at the ranch a little bit late because the bus driver gave them a bum steer. And the first person that they meet is Candy, who's the swamper. I'm going to put Lenny down. I have to keep hold of George because he's got a slightly detached leg, but that's okay. We don't need to know about that. Now, this is Candy the swamper, and you can tell that he's old because he's got grey hair and grey whiskers. And the most important thing about Candy is he got his hand chopped off in a threshing machine when he was younger. So this Candy has actually lost his entire arm, but that's okay. So poor Candy, he doesn't have a very good time, and he's kind of trapped on the ranch because he can't get another job. He's quite old, and actually they're doing right by him by giving him a job at all. So they meet Candy, and Candy kind of gives them the lowdown on all the people that they're just about to meet. He introduces all the characters that we're going to see in the next few chapters, and most importantly, because we don't see him very much in this chapter, he introduces Crooks. He is the stable buck. He's the only black character on the ranch, so a little bit like someone else we're going to meet later, Curly's wife. He's an outsider for that particular reason. One of the most important quotes about him is that Candy says, "Yeah, nice fella too. Got a crooked back where a horse kicked him. The boss gives him hell when he's mad, but the stable buck don't give a damn about that. He reads a lot. Got books in his room." Now, this piece of information is actually quite important because what John Steinbeck is telling us is that although Crooks is a little bit overlooked because of all of these reasons, he's very intelligent still, and it means that just because he's black and because he's a social outcast doesn't mean that he doesn't have a very powerful internal world, that doesn't have a lot to say for himself. So he's trying to challenge some of the stereotypes that people might have had of people at that particular time. But you also learn something about the boss here because it says the boss gives him hell when he's mad, which tells us straight away that the boss is not perhaps the nicest boss in the world. It does say the stable buck don't give a damn about that. He reads a lot, as if these two things are connected, as if by him reading, that gives him a status above the other characters on the ranch. So Candy tells us that, and then he goes off and does his swamping, and in comes the boss. Now, the boss is fat gingerbread man because he eats a lot because he's the boss. And also, he wears his high-heel boots and spurs to prove he's not a working man. So the boss comes in, and he asks George and Lenny why they're late. And George, I'm just going to leave his leg off. George tries to answer for both of them. He gets a little bit suspicious because Lenny doesn't speak. Lenny doesn't speak because George has told him not to, because George is of the opinion that if people see him work before they hear him speak, they're going to appreciate him and trust him. So he says to George, "Well, I never seen one guy take so much trouble for another guy. I'd just like to know what your interest is." So the boss is quite suspicious by nature. And it also shows how unusual it is for George and Lenny's friendship to be found in such an environment, because people on the ranch are lonely. They don't have friends. They don't have those sustained relationships. So the boss's line there is quite an important one. George and Lenny, after they've met the boss, have a little conversation amongst themselves. And George reminds Lenny about the dream. "I don't like it here, George." Actually, he doesn't say that yet, but whatever. And Candy is outside listening in. Candy has got another great quote, which you could use in an essay, which says, "A guy on a ranch don't listen or he don't ask no questions." So he scratches his stump and he minds his own business. Because in a world like that, it doesn't do to get too involved in anybody else's life. Then we meet the baddie of the whole piece, Curly. Oh no! Ironically, Curly's arm is coming off, but that doesn't happen until chapter 3, so let's hold it on. Don't lose your arm, Curly. You can see Curly's very angry, but he's got his curly hair. And he comes in, and he's like a lot of little guys, all the time picking fights on big guys. That's what Candy tells us. And he comes in, and he glances coldly at George, and then at Lenny. "Oh, don't hurt me, Candy, Curly. And then it says, his arms gradually bent at the elbows and his hands clenched into fists. He stiffened and went into a slight crouch. His arm fell off. Which tells us that he is a guy who likes to fight. Very significant. This is foreshadowing the moment where he gets his hand crushed by Lenny in chapter 3. Totally did that on purpose. That was a literary technique. Right. George is a little bit worried by this, and he tells Candy, Lenny ain't no fighter, but Lenny's strong and quick, and Lenny don't know no rules. What he's worried is that Lenny's going to get into a fight, and because he's so quick and so strong and he doesn't know any rules, it's going to end badly for the other person. Another massive hint of what is to come. Steinbeck and his foreshadowing, seriously, it's left, right and centre in this bit. Anyway, at that point we have another major character introduced, and it's Candy again who does the introduction, and he introduces the character of Slim. And he says, Slim don't need to wear no high-heeled boots on a grain team, which demonstrates the contrast between Slim and Curly and the Boss. Curly and the Boss both wear their high-heeled boots and spurs to show they're not working men, where Slim has got natural authority. He doesn't need to show off using his kind of costume things that he wears. So we hear about Slim, but we don't see him yet. He's kind of this mythical figure that doesn't come in. I'll tell you who does come in though. Curly's wife. Now you notice our key colour, Curly's wife, red. She's got her red dress, she's got a red lip, she's got a red nail, she's got a red ostrich feather shoes. Red. She's dangerous. She's a kind of a symbol of the violence that's to come, that's to surround her. She's sexual, she's overtly flirtatious. And she comes in, and it says, she put her hands behind her back and leaned against the door frame so that her body was thrown forward. You're the new fella's just come in, ain't you? She's straight away all over the men, and poor Lenny, he's quite vulnerable to the charms of a woman, and he's going, oh, she's pretty. George says, don't you look at her. I ain't never seen no piece of jailbait worse than her. And Lenny goes, but she's so pretty. And he says to him, listen to me. Don't you even take a look at that bitch. I seen 'em poison before, but I never seen no piece of jailbait worse than her. Then he just goes, I wasn't looking, George. And he says, no, but you weren't looking the other way, neither. So he's already very anxious. And we know, rightly so, because what happens later is that this little harlot is responsible for the downfall of our lovely Lenny. It's very sad. Right. At this point, Lenny gets quite upset. And he says, I don't like this place, George. This ain't no good place. I want to get out of here. Which shows that even though Lenny lacks understanding in many areas, he's actually quite sensitive to the moods on the ranch, and he understands what's going on. But they don't have a choice. They've got to work for a few days at least. They've got to get their money together because they've got this dream. They've got to get the house. They've got to buy the ranch of their own. You know, they know what they're working for. It's not just for their 50 and found, as they say. So it's not just for your money and get out of there. Then Slim comes in. Now, I've depicted Slim with a halo. I made him tall. He's not particularly slim. That's the nature of gingerbread men. They rise. Slim is described as the prince of the ranch. His ear heard more than was said to him, and his slow speech had overtones, not of thought, but of understanding beyond thought. It's really overdone, this description of Slim. He's clearly a powerful character. He's described as a godlike figure. You know, his the idea that his ear hears more than is said to him, that he's got this kind of omniscience, this power over the people around him, and they all look to him for approval in everything they do. He is in fact very powerful. And Slim, he talks to George, and he's not judgmental, he's not suspicious like the boss is, but he just says, ain't many guys travel together. I don't know why. Maybe everybody in the whole damn world is scared of each other. Which is a really nice analysis because, you know, frankly, the way things turn out in this book, you should be scared of everybody else in the world. And final point that I'm going to make on this section is the quotation where Carlson comes in. I haven't got a Carlson, so I'm going to use the arm that fell off Candy to represent Carlson. Oh no, it fell off Curly. And he says to Candy that he should shoot his dog. Now it's really sad because Candy's only got one friend in the world, and it's his old dog. He's had him since he was a pup. He raised him up himself. And although it stinks the place out and it's no good to itself and it just sleeps all the time, and the men don't like it because it makes the bunkhouse smell, he really loves it. It's kind of the only other really loving and caring relationship. But Carlson just says, it stinks, gotta kill it. And so when Slim's dog has puppies, he says to Slim, why don't you get Candy to shoot his old dog and give him one of the pups to raise up? And this is the first idea of this significance of this shooting. They want to shoot the dog because it's past its best and because it's useless. Candy is frightened that when he's past his best and when he's useless, he's going to kind of get chucked out on the rubbish heap as well. And of course, what happens at the end with Lenny is that when he becomes he's outstayed his welcome in the world in a way, he can't carry on living in a way that's uninterrupted by other people. He also gets shot. So it's the first introduction of this idea, and it's Carlson that's got the gun. He's got the Luger that ultimately kills the dog, and ultimately after that kills Lenny. So there's a lot of stuff going on. Basically, we meet a lot of characters and we form a lot of opinions of them. George and Lenny get there, and we already have the vibe that this isn't a good place, and we've got the sense that things are going to go horribly wrong. And that is the end of our Gingerbread Man interpretation of Chapter 2 of Mice and Men. And George and Lenny, since they're both still alive and at this point still relatively happy, would like to say goodbye.